You know, the funny thing about the Middle Ages is that everyone today thinks they were paranoid until you actually step into their world. The moment you do, you realize they were barely paranoid enough. And tonight, as you settle in and let the day fall away behind you, I want to take you gently into that world, quietly, carefully, one candle at a time. Because the deeper you go, the more you'll see that medieval conspiracy theories weren't wild tales whispered by frightened villagers. They were survival guides. And very often, they were absolutely true. Hey guys, welcome. Tonight we're beginning a journey through the dimmer corners of medieval Europe, where secrets were currency, whispers traveled faster than horses, and nothing, absolutely nothing was taken at face value. Before we get too far though, I want you to get comfortable, maybe dim your lights, or turn on that little fan you use for background noise. Let your shoulders relax a bit. If you've got a soft blanket within reach, go ahead and pull it up. This is your time, your quiet moment, and the world can wait a little while. And if you enjoy these slow candlelit wanderings through history, feel free to subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. No pressure. I always say this channel is like a little medieval inn. You step inside, warm your hands by the fire, stay as long as you like, and the door is always open. Speaking of inns, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. I love scrolling through and seeing how many corners of the world we all gather from: tiny apartments in big cities, farmhouses in quiet countryside, dorm rooms, hotel beds, night shift break rooms, even long-haul trucks parked beneath wide, starry skies. Somehow, we all end up sharing this same quiet hour together. Now, let's slip slowly into the story. Picture yourself waking in a small medieval cottage, a place that smells faintly of wood smoke and old fabric, with a single candle burning low on a wooden table. The world outside is cold, still dusky, not quite morning. The walls crack as they settle, wind sighs through the gaps, and everything feels just a little too quiet. In this age, quiet wasn't comforting. Quiet meant uncertainty. Quiet meant someone, somewhere, was plotting something unseen. You pull on a rough wool tunic and step into your boots. The ground outside crunches underfoot. You're heading toward the castle kitchens, because that's where this whole journey begins, not on a battlefield or in a royal court, but in the one place where medieval fear lived most vividly, the royal dining hall. Because in this world, if you were a king, the most dangerous moment of your day wasn't war. It wasn't riding into battle, or making alliances, or passing judgments. No, it was lunch. And as you walk, your breath fogging in the cold morning air, you can already feel the tension that lived inside those stone walls every time a meal was prepared. Every pot, every bowl, every smiling servant with a ladle in hand, they were all potential conspirators. In the Middle Ages, food wasn't nourishment, it was a test, a gamble, a hope that whoever stirred your stew wasn't feeling particularly ambitious that day. But don't worry, you're not quite there yet. We're easing our way in. That moment comes soon. For now, you continue walking, and the path takes you through a waking village. People nod sleepily to one another. A dog trots by, nose to the ground. Someone is already tending to their fire, coaxing the flame with long, patient breaths. And even though everything looks peaceful, everyone here is carrying a secret of some kind, small, quiet pieces of information they've tucked away. Who argued with whom last night? Who's acting oddly? Who's suddenly richer than they were yesterday? Who visited the healer after dark? Who keeps going into the woods and won't say why? In this world, your survival often depended on paying attention to those tiny shifts. And as you breathe in the cool air, still heavy with night, you start to understand something. Medieval life wasn't defined by superstition or ignorance. It was defined by uncertainty. They lived in a world where disease appeared without warning, rulers changed overnight, armies moved without announcements, and letters took months to arrive. If they arrived at all, when information is scarce, conspiracy becomes common sense. Every rumor might be real, every whisper might save a life, every suspicion might be the only warning you'll ever get. That's the tone of the life you're stepping into tonight. You continue walking, following the curve of the road toward the looming castle. The sky lightens softly, brushing the horizon with pale blue. Birds begin their morning calls, one by one like timid musicians warming up before a performance. Your boots crunch on frost, and the sound echoes in the stillness. The closer you get to the castle, the more awake the world feels. Guards shift on their posts. A stable hand yawns, brushing hay from his clothes. A servant scurries past carrying a basket of bread so stale you could build a house with it. And soon, very soon, you'll step into that kitchen, the heart of our first conspiracy. But for now, pause for a breath. Feel the cool air fill your lungs. Let the tension of medieval life settle around you, not as fear, but as atmosphere. A kind of cinematic hush. You're entering a time where secrets were stitched into every corner of life, where the line between truth and rumor didn't matter nearly as much as the consequences of believing the wrong one, where a candlelit hallway could hide a whispered plot, where a shared cup of ale might contain more than peace or hospitality, where people trusted slowly, lived carefully, and listened constantly. Tonight, you'll wander those shadows. You'll hear the stories they whispered in taverns, the legends they believed without question, and the conspiracies that shockingly weren't conspiracies at all. So draw in a slow breath, let your shoulders sink, let your thoughts soften. In a moment you're going to push open the heavy wooden door to the castle kitchens and breathe in the chaotic, questionable aroma of a royal breakfast. Where trust was scarce, danger was common, and tasting food was considered an extreme sport. For now, welcome to Candlelit History, and welcome to the medieval world, where every rumor has a little truth hiding inside it. Now we will move on to the story. The castle kitchen is already awake long before you step inside. Even from the courtyard, you can hear it. An uneven symphony of clattering pots, boiling cauldrons, chopping knives, raised voices, and the occasional dramatic sigh from a cook who has clearly been awake since last year. You pause at the threshold, feeling the wave of heat rush into the cold morning air, warm and heavy like someone has taken all the smells in the world and squeezed them into one room. And then, with a deep breath, you push open the door. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Not a simple smell, but a whole collection of them, layered like the pages of a book no one bothered to organize. There's roasting meat, old onions, something suspiciously fishy, boiling grain, burnt bread. Is that vinegar? Or wine? Or a potion someone hoped would turn into wine? In the Middle Ages, those lines blurred very quickly. Dozens of servants rush past you, carrying trays, hauling buckets of water, lifting steaming lids to peek at their contents, as though the food inside might attempt an escape. The ceiling beams are dark with centuries of smoke, and the floor is a battlefield of footprints, flour, spilled ale, and one unfortunate carrot that will absolutely be found later and blamed for something dramatic. But this chaos isn't the real danger. The real danger is hiding in plain sight. You move deeper into the kitchen, weaving around cooks who barely notice your presence. There's an energy here, an undercurrent you didn't feel in the quiet village outside. Everyone here works fast, but also carefully. Eyes dart, hands hesitate ever so slightly before adding ingredients. Words are exchanged in low tones, and every few moments, a servant glances toward the high table at the far end of the room, where the king's meal is being assembled with far more suspicion than ceremony. Because in this castle, food isn't just food, it's politics, it's power, it's opportunity. And everyone knows it. A taster stands by the hearth, a thin man with tired eyes, who looks like he hasn't enjoyed a meal in years. His job is simple. Eat before the king does, and if he suddenly falls over clutching his stomach, well, that's the day's mystery solved. He watches the cooks like a hawk, tracking every pinch of spice, every ladle of broth, every hand that comes too close. You can feel the tension tightening as he approaches the stew pots. A cook hands him a small bowl with trembling hands. The taster inspects it, and for a moment you swear he's holding his breath. Then slowly, he raises the spoon to his lips. Everyone in the kitchen pauses, the fire crackles, a pot bubbles, a drop of stew slips down the edge of the spoon. He tastes it, and the room exhales. Not poisoned. Not today. The cook quietly thanks several saints at once under his breath. But you notice something. The taster didn't look relieved. Not at all. He already expects to die someday from this job. Not in a glorious battle, not in a heroic sacrifice, just by eating breakfast. Nearby, a group of kitchen boys whisper among themselves while plucking feathers from chickens. You catch only bits of their conversation. Someone was caught sneaking into the pantry at dusk. A servant said a stranger asked too many questions at the gate. A shipment of herbs arrived from a region the castle isn't on good terms with. The boys talk the way other children might swap scary stories, excited, nervous, half believing, and half not. Except here, any of those stories could be true. Poison wasn't uncommon in medieval courts. It wasn't even surprising. Why wage a bloody civil war when you could let an enemy die peacefully over a bowl of soup? Kings ruled entire lands, but cooks ruled their stomachs, and sometimes their fate. A tiny pinch of a bitter root, a little too much ground seed from a plant no one could identify, a powder with no scent at all. It didn't take much. And most important, poison required no witnesses. You take another step deeper, into the narrow storeroom. It's dim there, lit by only a single lantern, shelves aligned with herbs, spices, roots, dried leaves, sacks of grain, salt, and rows upon rows of jars whose labels have long faded or weren't written in the first place. There are jars of saffron, worth more than the average peasant makes in a year, right beside jars of powders so dangerous you wouldn't dare open them without a prayer. Most of them look innocent, almost harmless, the perfect disguise. You reach out and touch one of the jars, and for a moment you feel as though the kitchen is watching you back. Someone once said that medieval kitchens had more plots than the royal gardens, and you're starting to see why. No one trusts anyone here. Not fully, not ever. Suddenly a loud clatter makes you jump. Someone's dropped a ladle. A cook swears loudly enough to offend 6 different saints. A pot boils over. Someone else asks if the fresh basil looks a little too fresh, which earns them a glare from the head cook. The tension grows thicker, and you start to sense the weight of this place pressing in from all sides. So many people, so many hands, so many opportunities for accidents, or plans. But you're not here just to watch. You're here to understand this world, to see how the threads of medieval paranoia weaves themselves into daily life. And you realize something. This kitchen isn't the exception, it's the rule. Every meal in every noble household carried this same silent fear. Every castle had its own taster. Every king, queen, and noble watched their plates like hawks. Spices came with stories. Herbs were locked away like jewels, and rumors about poisoning traveled faster than good news, spreading from castle to castle like wildfire. Yet here, in the thick of it, you begin to notice something else. A whisper of a deeper truth. Something much older than the kitchen. Something that starts long before breakfast and stretches out into the dark edges of the forest, where secrets hide among the trees. Because the farther you are from the king's plate, the stranger and more mysterious medieval beliefs become. This fear of poison, it's only the surface. There were darker fears, older fears, that shaped this world long before kings built castles. Fears of shadows in the woods. Fears of rituals carried out in moonlight. Fears of quiet gatherings that no one dared speak of in daylight. And as you turn to leave the kitchen, stepping back into the cool morning air, you catch sight of something unusual, half hidden, almost invisible, tucked into a servant's apron. A bundle of herbs tied with a strange knot. Not from the kitchen's supply. Not from any shelf. Something brought in from outside, from the forest, and suddenly, the air feels colder. Because where we're going next, the conspiracies aren't cooked in kitchens. They're whispered under trees. You leave the heat and noise of the castle kitchen behind, stepping back into the cool breath of the morning. The door closes with a low thud, and suddenly everything feels quieter again, almost too quiet. The bustle of the courtyard fades as you walk, and for a moment you can still smell the strange herbs that servant tucked into their apron, the ones that definitely didn't come from the castle gardens. It lingers in your nose like smoke after a candle is blown out. Your path leads away from the stone walls, down toward the line of trees resting at the edge of the village. The forest stands there like a sleeping giant, dark and heavy with shadows even in the early light. You notice something odd as you approach. No birds are singing inside it. They sing in the hedges, on the roofs, from the barns. But the forest itself keeps its silence. People in medieval villages always paid attention to silence. Silence was never just absence, it was warning. You pause at the boundary where the last thatched cottage ends, and the first trees begin. The villagers walk by without looking toward the woods. A pair of women carrying water glance at the tree line and quickly look away, as if holding eye contact with it for too long would invite trouble. A shepherd guides his flock past and mutters a small blessing under his breath. Even the dogs skirt wide, choosing the longer route around the trees. It becomes obvious in moments. Everyone knows something about these woods, and nobody is willing to say it. You step inside anyway. The forest greets you with a rush of cool air, thick with the smell of damp earth and last night's dew. Light filters in through the canopy in thin golden blades, illuminating floating dust like tiny drifting spirits. The trees here are older than the village, older than the castle, older than nearly everything you've seen so far. Their roots coil like sleeping snakes beneath fallen leaves. Ferns brush softly against your legs as you walk. Not far along the path you see the signs. Not dramatic ones, subtle ones, the kind people pretend they don't notice. A circle of stones too perfectly arranged to be natural, a patch of earth cleared recently, though no animal tracks surround it. A fallen branch marked with a carved symbol, faint but deliberate, and then the faintest trace of burnt herbs. Not the herbs used in cooking. These have a sweet resinous scent, something meant for ritual, not flavor. You crouch for a moment, touching the earth. It's still warm. Whatever happened here, it happened last night. The stories begin to unfurl in your mind, not the official church accounts but the whispered ones. The ones villagers tell when fires burn low, and they're sure no priest is listening. Stories of forest gatherings, of old songs passed from grandmother to granddaughter, of barefoot rituals meant to protect crops, heal sickness, or simply survive the suffocating uncertainty of medieval life. These were not sinister groups, not satanic cabals conjured up by frightened imaginations. They were in truth something much simpler. People who remembered the old ways. Before the church tightened its grip, before priests declared everything unsanctioned to be Satan's work, before fear became the loudest voice in the village. You keep walking, deeper now, following a path that seems to unfold beneath your feet as though someone laid it there not long ago. The forest thickens around you, the sounds of the castle and village disappear entirely. You reach a small clearing. At first glance it's nothing remarkable. A ring of trees creating a natural circle, a patch of moss undisturbed, the gentle trickle of a small stream nearby. But then you notice the details, herbs hanging from low branches, tied with braided fiber, stones arranged in a crescent shape. A stump covered with faint chalk markings. This isn't a hiding place, it's a meeting place. You step closer to the herbs hanging overhead. Some you recognize: sage, yarrow, fennel. Others are unfamiliar, shaped strangely, dried into unusual knots. You reach out to touch one bundle, but a sudden sound stops you cold. A twig snaps, not far, not accidental. Someone is here. You freeze, listening for breath, movement, anything. The forest holds its silence for a long, heavy moment, as if it's watching you decide what to do. Then you hear it again, another soft crack, followed by a rustle. You turn slowly, expecting to see a villager or a healer. Instead you see nothing. Not a shadow, not a figure. Only the forest breathing around you. You step back, your foot brushing against something partly buried in the dirt. You kneel and brush away a thin layer of soil. It's a small wooden charm, crudely carved but clearly intentional. A protective charm, meant to ward off illness or misfortune. These were common among the Benandai, the good walkers of northern Italy, people who believed their spirits left their bodies at night to battle witches and protect the harvest. They weren't cultists, they weren't sorcerers, they were farmers desperate to keep their fields alive. But the church never saw nuance. Anything not approved was suspicious. Anything old was dangerous. Anything hidden was automatically heresy. You slip the charm into your hand. It's warm. Warmer than it should be. A gust of wind rushes through the clearing, and the herbs overhead sway violently. The trees creak. A sudden chill crawls up your spine. You turn again, scanning the tree line, and for a moment, just a moment, you see movement, a figure. Cloaked, watching. You blink and they're gone. You stand in the clearing, heart beating just a touch faster, realizing something important. If these gatherings still happen, they're happening carefully, quietly, under the threat of punishment. under the gaze of priests who see enemies in every shadow. You step backward, leaving the clearing as gently as you entered it. Your mind races with what you've seen, with the signs, with the figure in the trees. You emerge back into the sunlight, the forest line now behind you like a secret you weren't meant to uncover. But as you near the village again, something else catches your attention, something new, something unexpected. A monk, walking briskly toward the forest, robes swaying, eyes sharp, holding a folded parchment and a small vial of holy water. And not just any monk, a Dominican, the kind trained to investigate suspicious activity, the kind sent to sniff out hidden rituals, the kind who asks too many questions and gathers too much information. You step aside as he passes, but he doesn't look at you. His gaze is locked on the trees you just left. And suddenly, you realize something. Whatever secrets the forest holds, someone else is hunting them too. And the monks in this world, they don't just pray, they watch, they listen, they remember. The Dominican monk disappears into the forest so quickly that for a moment you wonder if you imagined him. His black and white robes flicker between the trees like a shadow dissolving into deeper shadow. You stand there in the thinning morning mist, letting the village soundscape slowly return around you, carts rolling over uneven stone, a dog barking at a chicken that clearly started the argument, and in the distance the muted clang of the castle smithy waking for the day. All normal sounds, comforting sounds. Yet the sight of that monk shifts the entire morning into a different tone. Because monks, especially Dominicans, weren't supposed to walk into forests alone. Not like that. Not with parchment tucked tightly under their arms. And certainly not with the kind of sharp, determined pace that belongs less to a holy man, and more to someone with a mission they're not supposed to talk about. You find yourself drifting back toward the village, but your thoughts remain with the monastery that sits just a short ride beyond the hills. You've seen it before from a distance. Squat stone buildings, small windows, a bell tower that leans slightly to one side as if exhausted from centuries of ringing. People always describe monasteries as peaceful havens, houses of God, learning, quiet contemplation. And yes, some monks spent their days in prayer, copying manuscripts, brewing ale, or tending gardens full of herbs that truly were medicinal and not suspicious at all. But others? Others served a different purpose entirely. You walk along the dusty path toward the monastery road, letting the landscape stretch wide around you. The wind carries the faint smell of dried hay, and the hills roll outward like slow ocean waves. If you didn't know any better, you'd think this peaceful place had no secrets at all. But medieval monasteries weren't just spiritual sanctuaries, they were information hubs, centers of literacy in a world where reading was more rare than gold. And knowledge, of course, is the first ingredient in any conspiracy. As you follow the winding path upward, you picture what goes on behind those thick monastery walls. Monks receiving travelers in the guest hall, listening to confessions from villagers who trust them more than their own families, writing letters on behalf of nobles who can't write for themselves, hearing whispered rumors from merchants bringing goods from distant lands, passing information through networks of other monasteries that stretched across kingdoms like veins. To most people, monks appeared quiet, humble, good-hearted, trustworthy, and maybe they were, but they were also observant, more observant than anyone realized. Each monastery kept records, chronicles, letters, reports of local behavior. Some documented births, deaths, marriages. Others documented things far less innocent, unusual gatherings, strange illnesses, heretical whisperings, murmurs of rebellion, questionable alliances between noble families. And the Dominicans, the order of preachers, had an additional mandate to investigate heresy, to follow trails of suspicion, to gather intelligence. You glance behind you as you climb the last stretch of road, half expecting to see another monk appearing like a crow in the corner of your vision. But the road is empty. The monastery sits ahead, its gates open. A single monk tends the herb garden just outside the walls, trimming branches with quiet precision. As you pass him, he offers a polite nod but watches you a moment longer than necessary. His eyes flick toward the path you came from, the forest path. You don't say anything, but his expression tells you he already knows where you were. Inside the monastery courtyard, the world takes on a different rhythm entirely. The sounds are muted, softer, sandaled feet brush lightly against stone. Voices murmur in the cloister walkways. A scribe scrapes a quill against parchment in a room nearby. Scratch, pause, dip, scratch. A monk sweeps the courtyard in long, slow strokes, his face unreadable. The tranquility here isn't fake, but it isn't naive either. It's the kind of calm built by people who know more than they ever planned to reveal. You wander toward the chapter house, guided by curiosity more than courage. The door is slightly ajar, and you hear voices inside. Two monks speaking in low tones. They mention recent sightings in the forest. Someone named Brother Matthias reports unusual symbols carved into trees. Another monk wonders whether those gatherings are merely superstition or the older rituals returning again. Their voices sharpen when they mention that Dominican you saw earlier. Brother Ulrich, they call him. A man the others describe as zealous in his duties and uncomfortably perceptive. A chill runs through you. These monks aren't gossiping. They're tracking something. They're categorizing it, cross-referencing it, comparing it to old notes in some quiet archive. And suddenly you understand what makes monasteries so unnerving. They remember everything. They forget nothing. In a world where most people kept records only in their memories or not at all, monks wrote things down. And once written, those things could travel from monastery to monastery, kingdom to kingdom, bishop to bishop, whisper to whisper. You take a step back from the doorway before they notice you. Blending again into the courtyard, a novice hurries past with an armful of scrolls, nearly tripping over his robe. You catch a glimpse of inked titles concerning local customs, accounts of strange practices, reports of nocturnal activities. These aren't religious texts, they're observations organized, curated, analyzed. You wonder how many villages have been mapped this way. How many harmless rituals have been recorded as suspicious? How many forest clearings like the one you discovered have been documented in ink? For a moment you feel the weight of the monastery pressing in around you, not through menace, but through knowledge, through quiet, methodical attention, through the awareness that in this world secrets rarely stay hidden for long, not when men trained to identify heresy walk freely across the land with their keen eyes and silent quills. As you turn to leave, the great wooden door of the scriptorium creaks open, and a figure steps out. You recognize him instantly. Brother Ulrich, the Dominican from the forest. His eyes are sharper now in daylight, bright with curiosity or suspicion. You can't quite tell. He pauses when he sees you, as if calculating where you fit in the puzzle he's assembling. His hand tightens around the folded parchment at his side. For a heartbeat, you're certain he will question you. Where you've been, what you've seen, whether you know anything about the carved symbols or the bundled herbs. But instead he gives a tight, polite smile, too polite, and walks past without a word. His silence unsettles you more than interrogation would have. You watch him go, robes whispering across the stone floor. He moves with purpose, heading deeper into the monastery, toward the archives perhaps, or toward someone waiting with new information, or toward orders he doesn't want anyone else to hear. You exhale slowly, leaving the courtyard behind and stepping back into the sunlit road. The monastery walls rise behind you like a quiet fortress of secrets, and as you descend the hill, one thought lingers. If monks gather information, and they've seen what's happening in the forest, then what else have they seen? What else have they been watching? And who else have they been watching? Because where you're headed next, secrecy takes on a different shape entirely. Not whispers in the woods, not inked notes in monastery archives, but armored men whose quiet rituals and private wealth sparked some of the greatest conspiracies medieval Europe ever whispered. The Knights Templar, and they're waiting just beyond the next turn. Leaving the monastery behind, you follow a road that winds gently across rolling farmland. The landscape opens wide again. Golden fields, distant tree lines, a quiet stream threading through the valley like a silver ribbon. After the shadows and whispers of the forest and the silent scrutiny of the monks, the open air feels almost cleansing, but you can't shake the sense that you're walking deeper into the hidden machinery of medieval power, where every institution has two faces, one for the public and one for those who know where to look. A pair of merchants pass by, leading a sturdy mule loaded with sacks. You overhear them talking about taxes, shipping routes, and a name spoken quietly, Templars. The word carries weight, even out here in the open countryside. People don't say it lightly, they say it like they're referring to something powerful, distant, wrapped in armor and mystery. And as their voices fade over the hill, You realize you're drawing close to a place where those rumors have substance, an old Templar preceptory, sitting like a stone sentinel at the crossroads ahead. When it comes into view, it doesn't look like a grand castle. Templars didn't need grandeur. Their strength wasn't in towering spires or gold-plated gates. It was in efficiency, practicality, quiet organization. The structure ahead is low, sturdy, built from pale stone that seems to drink in the sunlight. A small chapel rises at one side, its roof pitched sharply. Beside it sits a hall, a stable, and a building that might once have served as a treasury, though of course no one would confirm that openly. As you approach, a Templar in a white mantle marked with a red cross stands near the entrance. He isn't posing dramatically or gripping a gleaming sword. He's simply observing the road with a calm, disciplined stillness. But there's something unmistakable in his posture. Awareness. These men were trained to watch as sharply as they fought. He nods as you pass, but his eyes linger for a moment, assessing, calculating, curious. Inside the courtyard, the world shifts again. Everything here operates smoothly, almost eerily so. Horses move with disciplined steps. A pair of Templars train with wooden swords, their movements precise and silent except for the soft thud of blows against shields. Smiths hammer out nails and fittings, not grand weapons. Scribes work under an awning, heads bent over parchment as they tally numbers and record transactions. It looks more like the headquarters of a business than a knightly order, and that's because in many ways it was. The Templars were not just warriors, they were Europe's first international bankers. They invented systems that merchants, nobles, and even kings relied on. A traveler could deposit money in one Templar house and withdraw it hundreds of miles away. They issued letters of credit so sophisticated that later generations would call them early checks. Their vaults held treasure not just for themselves but for nearly every major ruler in Europe, but their secrecy fed suspicion. People didn't understand how their system worked. They didn't know how much wealth the order actually held, and they certainly didn't know what went on in the private chambers of each preceptory. To a medieval mind, anything hidden was dangerous. You wander into a long hall where a few Templars sit in discussion. Their voices are low, but you catch glimpses of their conversation. Shipments moving across seas, coded records of transactions, debts owed by nobles, and the mention of a sealed vault in the town nearby. They talk about these things with the calmness of men discussing the weather, but you feel a flicker of unease. These aren't just knights, these are administrators of an empire of information and wealth. In the corner of the hall stands a small table with an object beneath a cloth. One Templar pulls the cloth back briefly, revealing a carved wooden box bound with metal. Its lock is intricate, almost artistic, with a mechanism far more advanced than anything you've seen in the village. Whatever rests inside that box is not meant for casual eyes. And before you can look any closer, the cloth falls back into place. You step outside again, feeling the air shift around you. For all their discipline and silence, there's a tension here, something unspoken. Templars met privately at night. They held secret initiation rites. They used codes and symbols that ordinary people couldn't decipher. And while most of these practices were simply organizational, rumors spread unchecked. If a farmer didn't understand something, it became suspicion. If a noble didn't understand it, it became a threat. And if a king didn't understand it, well, that became catastrophe. A group of Templars walk past you toward the chapel, their boots crunching on gravel in unison. You follow quietly, stopping at the doorway. The chapel is dim inside, lit by a few candles that flicker against carved stone walls. A small altar stands at the front. It should look like any other sacred place, but something feels different, not sinister, just secretive. The rituals performed here weren't demonic, but they were private, closed, hidden from public eyes. In a world obsessed with transparency of devotion, that secrecy was enough to spark stories. You hear footsteps behind you, and turn. A Templar marshal stands there, tall, composed, watching you with a curious but not unfriendly gaze. Travelers don't usually wander this far into the order's heart, he says calmly. His voice is steady, but there's an unmistakable undertone. He wants to know why you're here. You offer a respectful nod. He studies you for another heartbeat, then gestures toward a nearby bench. You sit, and he speaks plainly, almost gently. about the Order's duties protecting pilgrims, safeguarding treasure, maintaining peace. Nothing dramatic, nothing incriminating. But as he talks, you notice he never tells you how much they know. The Templars gathered information just as methodically as monks did, through travelers, letters, and their wide network of preceptories. Their silence wasn't guilt, it was power. Eventually the marshal rises, nods once more, and leaves you alone in the chapel doorway. You watch him disappear into the courtyard, and feel the weight of every whispered rumor you've ever heard about the Templars settling on your shoulders, their treasures, their secret meetings, their coded books, their sudden catastrophic downfall. But none of that has happened yet. Not here, not in this moment. Instead, you stand in a quiet preceptory, where everything feels still on the surface, but charged underneath, like a storm gathering its first breath. You step back into the courtyard, one last time, and that's when you notice it. A sealed letter lying on the steps. The wax bears a symbol, a crowned seal you recognize from the stories whispered in taverns, a king's seal. Someone has sent the Templars a message, and if history has taught anything, it's this: when kings start writing letters to the Templars, someone is about to betray someone. You leave the Templar preceptory, with the image of that sealed letter burned into your memory. The king's wax crest felt like a warning wrapped in diplomacy, a reminder that power in the Middle Ages rarely moved openly. It crept through back doors, secret notes, whispered alliances, quiet motions that set entire nations trembling. But as you walk down the dusty road, letting the hills swallow the preceptory behind you, you sense that the political games of knights and kings are only one part of the greater pattern forming around you. There is another force looming on the horizon, a shadow you've heard murmured in markets, in taverns, in frightened corners of monasteries. A darkness that doesn't come on horseback, but on the back of rats, ships, and winds. The kind of darkness that no knight, no monk, and no king can fully control. The air feels strange as you enter the next town. You can't explain it at first. There's no smoke in the sky, no signs of battle, nothing visibly wrong. Yet the streets are too quiet. Windows are shuttered, even though the sun is high. A single cart stands abandoned with its wheels half sunk into mud. A dog picks nervously at scraps near a doorway, but darts away when it sees you, tail tucked. It's the kind of silence that doesn't belong to a sleepy afternoon. It's the silence of a place holding its breath. You pass a bakery where the door hangs open, the smell of yesterday's bread turning stale. No one stands behind the counter. The hearth is still warm though, meaning someone left in a hurry. A little farther on, you hear muffled coughing behind a closed window, weak, ragged, the sort that hollowed entire families. You take another step, and suddenly the memory strikes you. The timeline fits. The whispers you heard from merchants about ships arriving with sick crew. The letters monks hid beneath stacked parchment. The strange coded warnings passed quietly between clergy. This is plague country. Not a mild outbreak, not a fever, but the plague, the one that would carve its name across Europe like a scar. And already the church knows something, even if no one else does. You approach the town square cautiously. A pair of young boys stand beside the well, tossing stones into the water, but their eyes dart nervously toward the church. They whisper about priests locking themselves inside at night, about villagers seeing wagons carrying boxes toward the abbey under the cover of darkness, about bishops refusing to bless gatherings because they received information from distant cities. You ask gently what they mean, but the boys only shrug and run off. Children always notice things long before adults admit them. The church sits at the far end of the square, its stone walls pale and cold under the sun. You hear chanting from inside, not the usual clear melodic kind, but something quieter, strained. A few candles flicker through the stained glass windows. You step closer, and as you do, you spot a parchment nailed hastily to the door. A notice written in urgent script warns the townsfolk to avoid overcrowded gatherings, to maintain distance, and to stay vigilant for symptoms. The language is careful, almost cryptic, as though the writer wanted to say more but feared what panic might do. You push open the heavy wooden door, and the smell of incense hits you immediately, thick, almost suffocating. The nave is dim. Only a handful of villagers kneel in scattered pews, all spaced far apart. A priest stands at the altar with his hands folded tightly, his eyes weary and flicking toward a pile of letters resting beside the candles. You slide into a pew near the back, watching as he finishes the prayer and descends the steps to speak to a cluster of parishioners. They ask him questions you can't quite hear, questions about neighboring towns, about rumors of deaths, about a merchant who arrived from the coast and then disappeared. The priest answers softly, too softly, choosing every word as though it might be used against him. When he finishes, he turns away quickly, avoiding eye contact, and returns to the altar only long enough to gather his letters before slipping through a side door. Curiosity pulls you after him. You move into the church's side corridor, passing the vestry, following the faint sound of hushed voices. The corridor opens into a cramped room filled with scrolls, half-burned candles, and a table cluttered with maps and sealed missives. 3 priests stand over the table. One holds a letter with trembling fingers, another traces a line across the map from a port city to a market town to here. You realize what you're looking at: the church's private tracking system. A network of information flowing between bishops, abbots and clerics. They know where the plague has been. They know where it's going, and they know it's spreading far faster than anyone outside these walls realizes. You listen as one priest reads aloud from a newly arrived letter. It speaks of entire neighborhoods falling ill within days, of ships arriving with half-dead crews, of monasteries losing monks faster than they can bury them. Another priest whispers that they must prepare quarantines before the townsfolk understand what's coming. Their voices brim with fear, but also with something sharper: responsibility. They aren't hiding information out of cruelty. They're hiding it because panic is often deadlier than disease. But then comes the part that chills you most. A final letter lies half unrolled on the table, bearing a coded phrase you heard mentioned once before. The ship brings dark tidings. To the untrained eye, it's poetic. To these priests it's a warning used only when danger is certain but cannot yet be announced publicly. You suddenly understand why the churches are locking their doors early, why monks avoid the forest, why bishops have been quietly fleeing cities. They've been watching the plague advance since its earliest whispers, receiving reports long before ordinary people see the first signs. Information travels slowly on horseback, but faster through the clergy's invisible web. Before you can step away, one of the priests hears your foot against the stone floor. He turns sharply, his eyes widen, not in anger, but in fear of being overheard. Without a word, he folds the letters together, presses them to his chest, and closes the distance between you in a few brisk steps. He doesn't shout or scold. Instead, he speaks in a hushed voice so tense it barely rises above the air between you. "You must leave," he whispers. "What comes next? The town cannot bear it. No one must know yet." You want to ask more, but the fear in his eyes is real, and ancient and heavy, so you step back, letting him close the door behind you. The latch falls with a hollow click that echoes through the corridor like a warning bell. Outside, the sun seems dimmer than before. A horse-drawn wagon rolls past carrying crates nailed shut so tightly, you can't imagine what might be inside. The driver doesn't meet your gaze. He heads toward the church gates, where a monk unlocks them just long enough to let him enter. Then the gates close, and remain closed. You watch the last sliver of darkness seal itself behind iron and stone, and the thought strikes you like a chill down your spine. If the church knew this much before anyone else, and if they're concealing even more now, then what other threats, quiet, human threats, might be hiding behind religious walls? Because pain doesn't always come from sickness. Sometimes it comes from people. And the next people you will meet, the quiet men who walk at night wearing robes instead of armor, hold a different kind of danger in their hands. The church gates close behind you with a weight that seems to echo long after the metal has settled. The priests inside continue whispering over their maps and sealed letters, preparing for the storm they believe must be managed quietly, without alarming the people. You step back into the thinning afternoon light and walk away from the square, but the unease lingers like dust in your throat. There is fear in this town, the kind that spreads faster than disease, and you can't help but sense that the church's hidden knowledge isn't the only secret lurking at the edges of medieval life. The narrow road leading out of the village bends sharply toward the hills, guiding you through clusters of wind-twisted trees. The air grows cooler the farther you walk. A crow sits on a fence post and watches you pass with an unsettling stillness, as though it knows something you don't. In the distance you hear the faint toll of a bell from another religious house, this one much smaller than the monastery you visited earlier. Monks live out here too, tucked into remote corners of the countryside, far from the scrutiny of bishops and bustling towns. Most people imagine monasteries as peaceful refuges, safe places filled with prayer, duty, and gentle routines. And many were. But the deeper you travel into medieval life, the more you discover that every institution has shadows tucked behind the curtains. Monks, ironically, held one of the most perfect disguises available in this age. They were trusted, they were allowed to travel freely. They had shelter everywhere from abbeys to noble houses. They moved among all social classes, peasants, merchants, knights, lords, without drawing suspicion. Their robes were not just garments, they were shields. As you approach the modest priory on the hillside, you begin noticing details that disturb that familiar image of quiet holiness. The path leading up to the building is worn more deeply than you'd expect for such a small community, as though a great deal of foot traffic moves through here at night. A pair of monks stand near the entrance speaking in urgent tones, one clutching his robe tightly around something hidden at his waist. When they notice you, they both stiffen, their conversation ending abruptly. They exchange a glance, one so quick you'd miss it if you blinked, before one of them steps forward with a forced smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome, traveler," he says politely, but his voice carries a strain similar to the priest's in the plague-stricken town. You sense he wants to know why you're here, but he doesn't ask. Instead, he gestures toward the cloister garden with a vague suggestion of hospitality. You follow, though every instinct in your body whispers that this place holds more than herb beds and prayer schedules. Inside the cloister, the world is too clean, too organized, tools hang in perfect order on a wall, buckets sit evenly spaced. Not a leaf lies out of place on the swept stone paths. Such neatness could easily be mistaken for discipline, but it also looks like someone trying to hide traces of movements not meant to be seen. You notice a patch of disturbed dirt near the garden wall, recently dug, quickly refilled. The pattern is subtle, but you have seen enough in recent days to know when something has been buried in haste. Two monks walk past, whispering about a nobleman who passed unexpectedly not far from here. Their tone is not mournful. If anything, there is a strange neutrality to their words, as if the man's death was an item on a list, checked off and filed away. You hear one say, "He resisted too long," before they both fade into the far passageway. Your unease deepens. There are stories rarely written, always whispered, about lay brothers who performed work outside the holy duties of prayer and field labor. These men did not copy manuscripts or tend gardens, they did not teach or preach. Instead, they disappeared from their monasteries for days at a time with excuses about collecting alms or delivering messages. Yet they returned with bruised knuckles or torn hems, and no one ever questioned them. Their silence was reinforced by the power of the church itself. To accuse a monk of wrongdoing was to risk not only your reputation but your soul. You follow the cloister corridor toward the back of the priory, drawn by the sound of metal clinking softly. A young novice stands inside a storage room sorting tools, but as you look more closely, you notice something among the spades and buckets, something that should not be there. A blade, sharpened to a near-perfect edge, wrapped in cloth, not a farming tool, not a kitchen knife, too balanced, too precise, a weapon disguised poorly as a tool. The novice freezes when he sees you looking at it, his eyes wide with an emotion that isn't guilt, it's fear. Fear that he's been discovered. Before you can say a word, an older monk appears behind him. He doesn't look angry, he looks calculating, measuring, deciding how much you have seen and what kind of problem you might become. He steps between you and the novice with an almost protective ease. "That room is for brothers only," he says softly, but with a firmness that leaves no room for argument. He closes the door with deliberate slowness, as though sealing something inside. You step back, heart beating a little faster. When you turn to leave the cloister, you notice another detail, faint marks in the dirt near the outer wall, boot prints. Not soft leather sandals like monks wear, but hard-soled prints belonging to someone who steps with purpose. Someone strong, someone trained. They lead away from the priory toward a grove of trees just beyond the stone boundary. Curiosity pulls you along their path. The grove is dim, the trees tall enough to block most of the afternoon light. You follow the prints until they disappear into the leaf litter. At first you see nothing, but then your eyes adjust to the shadows, and you notice a patch of flattened ground, as though someone wrestled or struggled there recently. A scrap of cloth lies caught on a thorny branch, dark, coarse, stiffened by dried mud. Not a monk's robe, a nobleman's traveling cloak. You crouch, examining the ground more closely. There are deep indentations where boots pivoted, a scuff mark trailing toward the trees. You imagine the nobleman mentioned earlier, the one who died unexpectedly. You imagine a monk slipping from the shadows in silence, fulfilling a task handed down by someone higher in the hierarchy. Someone who wanted the man gone but did not want blood on their own hands. A branch snaps somewhere behind you. You stand slowly, turning your head without making sudden movements. Between the trees, a figure stands watching you, motionless, hood lowered to shadow the face. Not a priest from the plague town, not a Templar, a monk, one who didn't expect to find you here. One whose posture is not that of a frightened holy man, but that of someone evaluating risk. He takes a single step forward, and in that instant, you understand some secrets in medieval Europe were enforced not with scripture, but with steel. You turn back toward the path leading out of the grove, heart racing. Behind you, the monk does not call out, he only watches. Watches as though waiting for nightfall, as though night is when his orders begin. You don't stop moving until the priory walls are well behind you and the road widens once more. But the question follows you like a shadow stretching at dusk. If cloistered assassins exist, and if the church uses them to remove threats quietly, then who decides who is a threat? And who might they be watching next? Because the next group you encounter, the wise women and healers forced into secrecy, are about to become targets in ways far darker than you expect. You leave the priory behind with your heart still beating a little too quickly, the image of that silent monk lingering at the edge of your thoughts. The road ahead feels less predictable now, as if every bend might hide another figure emerging from the shadows. Yet the countryside slowly softens the tension. Gentle hills rolling into the distance, sheep grazing lazily beneath the midday sun, a faint breeze carrying the earthy scent of wild herbs. This is the kind of landscape medieval travelers would have mistaken for safety. But by now you know better. Danger in this world rarely wears armor or carries a banner. More often, it hides in whispers, in fear, in accusations that spread faster than plague. As the path descends toward a cluster of cottages, you notice something different about this small settlement. The buildings are spaced farther apart, as though the families who live here prefer the comfort of distance. Gardens spill over with plants you don't recognize. Long-stemmed stalks with purple flowers, creeping vines, tiny bright berries, and tall bundles of leaves tied upside down beneath the eaves to dry in the sun. You see no smoke from chimneys, no crowds, no marketplace energy. Instead, the air feels thick with quiet purpose. People here don't wait for merchants or doctors. They grow what they need. A woman stands near one cottage door, hanging bunches of lavender and rosemary. Her movements are calm and practiced, but she watches you the way someone watches a sudden gust of wind, curious, cautious, ready to close the shutters if it becomes more than a breeze. When you greet her politely, she nods but says nothing. A moment later, she gestures toward the path with an almost imperceptible flick of her eyes, silently guiding you toward a larger cottage nestled near the tree line. You follow the direction she gave, the road narrowing into a dirt path lined with herbs and wooden charms. The cottage ahead sits beneath the shade of an old ash tree. Its thatched roof is patched in places, but the garden surrounding it is nearly overflowing. Neatly arranged medicinal herbs, jars of tinctures, baskets of roots drying in the sun. Someone here knows what they're doing. Someone here understands plants the way monks understand scripture. As you approach, a soft voice calls out from inside. "Come in, traveler. You look like someone who's seen too much daylight today." The tone is warm but steady, carrying just enough confidence to make you sense that this woman doesn't fear unexpected visitors. Inside, the air smells of chamomile, honey, and something resinous with a sharp edge. Shelves line every wall, filled with bottles sealed with wax, mortar and pestle sets, bunches of herbs hanging from beams. and small wooden bowls containing powders and roots. The healer stands at a table grinding something into a paste. She's older, with streaks of silver braided into her hair, and her eyes have the kind of clarity that comes from years of listening more than speaking. When she looks up, she studies you with a depth that feels almost unsettling, not suspicious, just perceptive. She asks if you've come from the town to the east, the one already touched by the plague. When you nod, she sighs, slowly, as if she expected this news but hoped to be wrong. These things always start quietly, she murmurs. A merchant's cough, a fever no one takes seriously. Then someone dies too quickly. Then two more. And the priests begin their counting. You ask how she knows so much. She gives a small smile and taps one of the jars with her knuckles. Plants tell you more, if you know how to listen, and people tell you even more, if you don't ask too loudly. Her smile fades as she wipes ink-stained fingers on her apron. The church will blame us first, of course. They always do. The moment sickness spreads, someone must be guilty. There it is. The word she didn't say out loud but hung heavily in the space between you, witches. In truth, most so-called witches were healers, midwives, herbalists, and women who knew enough science to frighten those who didn't. They understood the cycles of plants, the symptoms of diseases, and the kind of remedies that could save lives. But knowledge is a dangerous kind of power, especially in times when fear is the loudest voice. She walks toward another table and picks up a small wooden charm, the kind you saw dangling in the forest clearing. People come here for these, she says. Good luck charms, protection charms, for crops, for children, for journeys. They're harmless, but harmless isn't always safe. You ask what she means, and her eyes darken. A monk came through last night, she whispers, not from the monastery you visited. A different one, traveling quietly, asking questions about gatherings in the woods, about herbs, about who meets with whom. She hesitates. He wasn't the kind of monk who prays for the soul, he was the kind who watches. A chill crawls along your arms. You remember the silent figure in the grove, the blade wrapped in cloth, the nobleman who died unexpectedly. Her voice lowers further. They believe we hide rituals in the forests. They think we summon storms, cause illness, invoke spirits. They think everything they can't explain is our fault. She reaches into a basket and pulls out a root shaped vaguely like a human figure, mandrake, used in medieval medicine and superstition alike. This alone, she says, is enough to get a woman burned. You stay silent as you watch her tuck the root away again, her hands steady with a practiced fear. She begins mixing a tonic in a clay bowl, honey, ground mint, something bitter you can't identify. For the children, she says. They'll need it soon when the fever reaches here. Outside, footsteps crunch softly on the path. The healer freezes. She raises a finger to her lips, then quickly moves you toward the back of the cottage, away from the door. The footsteps stop right outside. A heavy knock follows, slow, deliberate, not a villager's knock, not a friendly one. The healer smooths her apron, breathes once, and opens the door. A monk stands there, not the silent assassin from the grove, not the weary priests from the plague-stricken town. This one is different, tall, clean-robed, carrying a leather satchel and a polished wooden staff. His eyes scan the room with practiced efficiency, noting every jar, every herb bundle, every charm hanging from the beams. His smile is polite, but tight, professional. I've come on behalf of the bishop, he says gently. We've received reports of unusual gatherings, use of unfamiliar plants, practices that may require clarification. The healer gives a courteous nod, but you can feel the tension rippling beneath her calm exterior. The monk steps inside without waiting for permission. He looks around slowly, deliberately. Then his gaze lands on something behind you, something on the shelf you hadn't noticed before, a small leather-bound book with no title. His expression sharpens. That, he says, is not allowed. And as he steps closer, reaching toward the book with quiet authority, you realize exactly what kind of monk he is. Not a healer, not a scholar, not a traveler, an inquisitor. And the door behind him is still open, letting more footsteps approach. The inquisitor's presence hangs in the cottage like a smoke that refuses to clear. His eyes linger on the unmarked leather book, and the healer's hand tightens ever so slightly around the edge of her table. Outside, the approaching footsteps draw closer, soft thuds in the dirt path. 2. then 3, then 4. You don't know whether they belong to monks or soldiers or frightened villagers, but the healer seems to know exactly what they mean, and she moves with a sudden urgent calm. She leans subtly toward you, whispering to slip out the back door before the next knock arrives. There's no fear in her tone, only the resigned understanding of someone who has lived through such visits before. You nod, ducking low as she shifts her body to block the Inquisitor's view for a heartbeat. The back door creaks open, and you slip outside into the cool air of late afternoon, closing it behind you just as voices rise within. You step into the narrow garden path and move quickly toward the trees, letting the shadows swallow you. The healer's cottage fades behind branches and brambles as you put distance between yourself and the Inquisitor's questions. The tension lifts with each step you take, but the fear remains, a reminder that the church's search for blame never stops at one door. It spreads, it multiplies, it looks for new prey. As you continue walking, the forest thins and the land opens once more into long stretches of road. The sun begins its slow descent behind distant hills, painting the sky with muted gold and violet streaks. It's unsettling how peaceful everything looks after the chaos of inquisitors and whispered accusations. But medieval life had a habit of shifting gears without warning, moving from fear to rumor to myth, and from myth to something far stranger. You follow the bend of the road toward a small crossroads where a handful of travelers are gathered around a makeshift fire. Their cloaks look worn from travel, and their horses graze beside the ditch. They glance up as you approach, but instead of suspicion or hostility, they make room for you near the fire with the wordless ease of people who know the roads are full of dangers bigger than strangers. You sit, warming your hands as conversation drifts over the flames. They're talking about kings. Not the Templars' kings, the ones who send secret letters and orchestrate betrayals with ink and wax, but kings who vanished, kings who faked their deaths, kings who may or may not still walk the roads disguised as common men. At first their tone is casual, as though they're trading local stories for entertainment, but the more they speak, the clearer it becomes. These tales don't feel like legends to them, they feel like possibilities. One traveler, a merchant with a trimmed beard and well-worn boots, leans in closer to the fire. My grandfather swore he met King Vuldric alive, he says, lowering his voice. 3 years after the funeral, said the man had the same scar across his chin, same silver ring, traveling under another name. He shakes his head slowly, but when my grandfather tried to tell people, they threatened to cut his tongue out for treason. A young woman across the fire nods. It happens more than you'd think, she says. Kings fall in battle, and suddenly a man shows up in a distant village claiming he survived. Others disappear from their sick beds. Some refuse to accept death when their bodies are never found. She gives a half smile. People don't want rulers to die, and rulers don't always want to stay dead. There is something both eerie and strangely believable about the stories. After all, this is a world without portraits, without official records, without proof beyond rumor and memory. A man with a familiar voice or a familiar ring could convince half a kingdom he once wore a crown, and truth often bends under the weight of hope. Another traveler, a stooped old man with a walking stick polished smooth by decades of use, adds his story in a gravelly whisper. There was a boy in my village, he begins. Said he was the lost prince of the northern realm. Could name the queen's maids, the royal dog, every tapestry in the great hall. The old man pauses, poking the fire. He vanished one night, just disappeared. No one ever found him. But later, soldiers arrived asking questions. A lot of questions. You feel the fire's heat flicker across your face as the wind grows cooler. The stories are starting to feel less like coincidences and more like a pattern, one shaped by greed, fear, and political desperation. Claiming royal identity wasn't just a story, it was a weapon, and sometimes it worked. The merchant leans closer, his voice dropping. There are whispers now, he says. Whispers that a new pretender has appeared, someone claiming to be a king who died nearly 10 years ago. They say he knows too much to be lying. But they also say the real reason he's resurfaced is because someone is using him. Someone wants a puppet who can rally support. You swallow hard, sensing the weight of his words. In a world where truth is fragile, and memory even more so, a single man claiming a crown could tip a region into chaos. And if someone powerful is pulling the strings, then the game becomes far more dangerous than the imposters themselves. The old man's eyes flick to the shadows beyond the fire, as though expecting someone to step out of the darkness at any moment. Those who play with kings, he murmurs, tend to lose their heads. Night deepens around you. The travelers finish their meal, douse the fire, and lead their horses into the dark, leaving you alone at the crossroads. The silence settles again, not peaceful this time, but charged. Everything the travelers said continues to churn in your mind, shaping itself into a pattern that feels uncomfortably familiar. A forest full of secret rituals, monks who watch instead of pray, Templars with coded letters, priests tracking plague before anyone else knows, healers hiding knowledge to stay alive. And now kings who vanish or reappear as convenient tools for unseen hands. All of it points to something larger, an undercurrent moving beneath the surface of medieval life, threading through power, religion, fear and survival. And you can't shake the feeling that more than rumors lie behind these stories of wandering kings. Someone is guiding these events. Someone is benefiting. Someone is manipulating truth itself. As you rise from the crossroads and walk deeper into the gathering night, you hear something new, a sound that doesn't belong to the quiet countryside. Faint, metallic, repetitive, a rhythmic clatter. The sound of a well bucket striking the stone rim again and again. There's only one reason someone would be drawing water at this hour, or poisoning it. Because the next conspiracy isn't about kings at all. It's about wells, and the panic that can swallow a whole town when water turns from life to suspicion. The rhythmic clatter grows louder as you approach the next village, a slow, hollow knocking that echoes through the night, like the heartbeat of something uneasy. It's long past the hour when people should be out drawing water. At this time of night, doors should be bolted, shutters tightened, candles snuffed. Yet the sound continues, drawn out, like someone performing a task they don't want anyone else to see. The sky has darkened to a shade of blue that borders on black, and the moon hangs low overhead, casting a pale wash across the rooftops. You follow the road down a gentle slope until the village finally reveals itself. Crooked houses, narrow lanes, and at the center, the old stone well where the strange noise originates. As you step into the square, you notice immediately that something is wrong. A group of villagers stand nearby, huddled in a tight cluster with lanterns clutched in trembling hands. Their faces are pinched with fear, not curiosity. They watch the well as though expecting it to come alive. No one dares approach it. No one tries to stop the person drawing water, not directly. Suspicion hangs in the air thick as smoke. The bucket rises again, scraping against the inner stone rim, and you finally see the figure at the well. A young man, slim, jittery, shoulders hunched, hauls the bucket up and quickly dips a small pouch into it. He ties off the pouch and glances around nervously, unaware or uncaring that half the village is watching him. Then he pours the water back into the well, lowers the bucket again, and repeats the process. You move closer, and one of the villagers, an older woman clutching the lantern, hisses in a harsh whisper, "Don't go near him. He's been seen doing this since sunset." Another villager, a broad-shouldered man with a blacksmith's apron still on, adds, "He's been acting strange for days, keeps talking about curses and omens, says the water must be cleansed. But mark my words, he's doing something else." It doesn't take long to understand what they fear. In medieval Europe, nothing sparked faster panic than the idea that someone had poisoned the well. Wells were the beating heart of every settlement, sources of life that turned instantly to sources of death if corrupted. Disease traveled easily through water, though people didn't understand the biology behind it. They understood only that sickness spread, and someone must be to blame. The young man at the well pulls the bucket up again, with shaky arms. This time, he sprinkles a handful of powder into the water, something pale, gritty. The villagers gasp, recoiling. The blacksmith steps forward as if ready to intervene, but the older woman grabs his sleeve, shaking her head frantically. "No," she whispers. "If he's truly mad, he'll lash out, and if he's not mad." She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. You step closer, trying to see what the man is pouring into the well. But before you can, the church door at the far end of the square bursts open. A priest emerges, robes flapping, eyes wide with alarm. He rushes toward the gathered villagers. "No one touch the water," he cries. "Stay back, we must not assume it is safe." His voice cracks in a way that suggests this is not the first time he has dealt with something like this. The crowd parts nervously as he approaches the well. The young man notices him at last and freezes, clutching the pouch to his chest. His eyes widen with fear or guilt. It's hard to tell in the lantern light. The priest raises a hand. "What are you doing?" he demands. "What did you put in the well?" The young man stammers, stepping back until his heel hits the stone base of the well. I was cleansing it," he mutters. "I was told to cleanse it. Voices said the plague travels through water. They said we must purify it. They said." He stops abruptly, eyes flicking to the darkness behind the priest, as if seeing something he doesn't dare name. The villagers exchange uneasy glances. The priest steps forward again, softer this time. "Who told you this? Who spoke to you?" The young man's lips tremble. His fingers tighten around the pouch. "Travelers. A man in robes, not from here. He said the well was cursed. He said people here were cursed." The priest's expression shifts. Fear flickers across his features, quickly replaced by something more controlled. "What did he look like?" he asks. The young man hesitates, then whispers, "Like a monk." A cold shiver runs along your spine. The villagers murmur, their whispers turning sharp. "A monk," someone says. "From where? Was he from the priory? From the abbey? From the city? Or from somewhere else entirely?" The priest raises both hands, trying to calm them, but the fear is already building, crackling like dry wood around a spark. The young man finally loosens his grip on the pouch. It falls to the ground, the powder spilling across the stones. The priest crouches, dips his finger into it, sniffs cautiously, then sighs in a mix of relief and frustration. "It's ashes," he says. "Just ashes, harmless. But in large amounts," he rubs his forehead. "In large amounts, it could foul the water, ruin the taste, cause sickness." The villagers erupt in frightened murmurs. A woman cries out, covering her mouth. A man curses, kicking the dirt. Another demands the well be sealed until holy men can cleanse it. The priest tries to calm them, but panic is already flowing faster than logic. Fear of poisoned wells has started riots, pogroms and witch hunts throughout history, and you can feel that same ancient fear rising here, simmering just below the surface. Behind the crowd, you notice movement, a stranger standing by the shadows of a barn. His cloak is pulled tight, hood drawn low. He watches the scene with a stillness that resembles curiosity more than concern. When the priest looks his way, the stranger turns and slips behind the building without a word. You take a step toward the barn, but before you can follow, a sudden cry erupts near the well. The young man, the one who dropped the ashes, is gone, vanished. A lantern swings wildly as villagers turn in all directions. Someone claims he fled toward the fields. Someone else says he climbed over the fence. Another insists he slipped behind the barn, the same direction as the hooded stranger. The priest orders the villagers to stay together, but fear has scattered reason like birds startled from a tree. People rush into the darkness, calling out, stumbling, searching, accusing, and in the distance, you finally see him, the young man, running full speed past the last cottage, straight toward the woods. But he's not alone. A second figure follows behind. Not running, not shouting, not using a lantern, just walking, slowly, purposefully, as if he knows exactly how the night will end. You watch the two silhouettes disappear into the dark fields beyond the village, and a whisper of dread curls through your chest. Whatever frightened this man into cleansing the well, whatever monk spoke to him, whatever fear is spreading, none of it is accidental. And the next conspiracy you're about to encounter, the one involving secret heirs and royal bloodlines, makes the panic around the well seem almost simple by comparison. The village behind you dissolves into darkness as you follow the narrow road away from the well, the lanterns fading until they resemble floating embers in the night. The fields stretch out in long silhouettes, rustling gently with the breeze that drifts across them. Every few steps, you glance back, half expecting to see that hooded stranger standing at the edge of the cottages, watching. But the path is empty. The young man who fled has vanished into the night, and whoever chased after him has melted into the shadows as well. You push onward, the road ahead illuminated only by moonlight and your own unease. Night travel wasn't common in medieval times. Roads held dangers, thieves, wolves, and things that people never quite agreed on, but swore they'd seen. Yet some travelers had no choice but to walk after sunset. Some were escaping accusations, some were following rumors, and some were carrying identities that weren't entirely theirs. You think about the stories shared by the travelers at the crossroads, the supposed kings who reappeared, the princes who vanished, the pretenders with suspiciously accurate knowledge. Those tales seemed fanciful in the firelight, but here, in the solitude of the night, they feel different, more real, more possible. As the path bends around a small rise, you notice a lone figure walking ahead. At first it looks like a traveler minding their own business, cloak pulled tight, steps steady, no sign of threat. But as you draw closer, you sense something unusual. The person doesn't walk with the casual slump of a peasant or the confident stride of a merchant. Their posture is strangely upright, rigid even, and when they briefly turn their head, the hood shifts just enough to reveal something glinting beneath it, a brooch, a royal one. You slow your pace instinctively. The figure notices and stops, turning to face you fully. The moonlight catches their features, a man perhaps in his early 40s, with sharp cheekbones, tired eyes, and the unmistakable expression of someone who has been running for years without a place to rest. He studies you with a strange mix of caution and calculation, as though deciding whether you are a danger or a lifeline. "Are you traveling alone?" he asks quietly. His voice carries the softness of nobility, refined, educated, shaped by tutors rather than tavern brawls. Few peasants spoke with such clarity. Few even had the chance. You nod slowly, and he exhales with visible relief. "Good," he says. "Then perhaps I can ask something of you, something I dare not ask anyone from the last village." He glances over his shoulder toward the dark horizon, the direction from which you came. "There are people looking for me," he adds. "People who believe I am something I'm not, or perhaps something I once was." This sparks your curiosity. You ask his name. He hesitates. Then he says, "My name is Alistair, son of King Rowan, rightful heir to the throne of the Western March." The words hang in the air like frost. You stare at him, trying to judge whether this is bravery, madness, or something far more complicated. King Rowan died more than a decade ago, sickness, they said. His son perished shortly after, according to official accounts. The kingdom passed into the hands of a distant cousin, and the matter was considered settled. So why is this man claiming to be a dead prince? And more importantly, why does he seem terrified? He looks around nervously before continuing. "I know what it sounds like. Everyone tells me the same thing, that I am lying, or delusional, or seeking trouble. But those who hear the truth, those who really listen, they realize there are things I shouldn't know." He reaches beneath his cloak and retrieves a small silver ring. It is engraved with the crest of Rowan's lineage, a boar, a sword, and a starburst. You've seen this symbol in old carvings and dusty manuscripts. It is not something an ordinary wanderer could easily acquire. Alistair closes his fist around the ring. "My father died suddenly," he says, voice tightening. "Too suddenly," the court physician said. "Illness. But he was strong, healthy, until one meal ended that." His tone darkens. "They said I died too. But I didn't. I escaped the night. Soldiers came to finish what started at the high table. Pieces click into place. Poison, assassins, monks asking questions, royal impostors. It all feels tangled in the same invisible web. Someone had reason to make a royal family disappear, and if Alistair is telling the truth, those same forces may be hunting him still." You ask why he came here, to this region of fields and frightened villages. "Because I heard a rumor," he replies. "A rumor that someone here keeps documents, records of what truly happened the night my father died. A monk from a neighboring monastery wrote a letter before he too vanished. I'm trying to find that letter." You think back to the Dominican investigators, the secret archives, the priory with its hidden weapons. The church had been quietly collecting information about rituals and sickness, yes, but also about power. It's not impossible that someone within those walls knew more about the king's death than they dared to say aloud. Alistair takes a slow breath, steadying himself. "There are those who would use my name to rally armies. They would turn me into a symbol for their rebellion. I do not want that. I want truth." He looks you in the eye. "But the truth is dangerous. It always has been." You notice something shifting on the ridge behind him, a faint flicker of movement, as though someone ducked out of sight the moment they saw you together. Your stomach tightens. You realize that maybe Alistair wasn't the only one walking this road tonight. He sees the concern cross your face. You see them too, he whispers. You nod. He closes the distance between you and lowers his voice. Listen to me. If they catch me, they will claim I am an imposter. They will say I tried to poison the kingdom with lies, but I swear to you on the memory of my father, someone murdered him, and someone wants to make sure no one ever proves it. The wind shifts, leaves rustle. The shape on the ridge moves again, closer this time, sliding between patches of shadow as silently as a hunting cat. You see the glint of metal, the faint outline of a hood, the suggestion of a man trained not to be seen. A monk, an assassin, a king's loyalist, or someone else. Alistair steps back, gripping his cloak tightly. They found me, he says, voice trembling. I need to leave, now. But before I do, he reaches into his cloak again, pulls out a sealed parchment. This, he says, is part of the truth. I need you to take it somewhere safe if I don't survive the night. But before you can answer, the shadowy figure breaks from the ridge and begins descending toward you both with alarming speed. Alistair thrusts the parchment into your hand. Run. You don't have time to argue, question, or even breathe. Alistair shoves the sealed parchment into your hand, turns on his heel, and bolts into the darkness with the frantic urgency of a hunted animal. The figure descending the ridge picks up speed, moving with long, determined strides. It's not the clumsy sprint of a frightened villager, or the heavy-footed run of a soldier. This is controlled, trained. The hunter knows exactly how to move in the dark. You know instantly that you are not meant to be the target, but you're suddenly carrying something that makes you just as dangerous. The parchment feels heavier than paper should, thick, sealed with red wax, wrapped in twine. Whatever is inside is important enough to kill for, and if Alistair is right, it contains something that men in robes and men in crowns do not want exposed. You take off the only direction available, the sloping path that leads into the wide, dark field beyond the road. Your feet pound against the grass as you sprint across uneven ground, the wind slicing cold across your face. The night swallows your footsteps, but you can still hear the distant echo of Alistair running somewhere to your left, along with the quieter, chillingly steady rhythm of the man following him. You keep running until your lungs burn, the landscape blurring into shadowy streaks under the moonlight. Only when you reach the far edge of the field, a low, crumbling stone wall marking the outskirts of a monastic estate, do you stop to catch your breath. Your hands shake as you clutch the parchment. You don't dare open it here, too exposed, too vulnerable, and you know what must come next. There is only one place that might hold answers about a murdered king, a vanished heir, and the monk-led conspiracies threading through the countryside, a monastery's forbidden archive. The monastic estate ahead looks harmless enough. Stone buildings, a darkened chapel, a few dim lanterns flickering through narrow windows. But if you've learned anything on this journey, it's that monasteries hide more than hymns and prayer books. Some hide confessions never meant to be heard, records never meant to be read, and secrets that could topple noble families or spark rebellions if a single word escaped. You wait until the night is still, listening for any signs of pursuit. Nothing. Either the hunter has continued after Alistair, or you've bought yourself temporary safety. With slow, quiet steps, you approach the outer wall. It is low enough to climb, old enough to crumble beneath your weight. You swing a leg over, drop silently into the grass on the other side, and crouch beside the nearest building. The air here smells of ink, damp parchment, and smoke from dying candles, the scent of monastic life that never sleeps entirely, even when the monks do. You navigate around the cloister, careful to avoid the lantern glow spilling from a few late-night workshops. A scribe's quill scratches faintly from one room. A novice sweeps the hallway of another, humming a hymn under his breath. You wait for him to leave before slipping through an unlocked side door into the main building. Inside, the monastery feels colder, heavier, almost suffocating. The hallway stones absorb the chill of the night, and your footsteps echo even when you try to tiptoe. You move deeper, guided by instinct and fragments of whispered rumors you've collected, stories of secret libraries, hidden rooms behind chapels, and archive doors opened only by men who have sworn oaths never to reveal what they read inside. Your hand finally rests on a wooden door, marked with a simple but unmistakable symbol, a quill crossed with a key. This is it, the monastic archive. You try the handle, locked. But the wood is old, the frame brittle, a little pressure, a little patience, and the door yields with a soft, defeated sigh. You slip inside and close it quietly behind you. The room is colder still. Rows of shelves rise like dark wooden skeletons, each filled with scrolls, bound manuscripts, loose letters, and ledgers stacked with the neat precision of men trained to catalogue every detail of the world. A single candle burns low at the center table, its flame wavering as though startled by your presence. You move toward the shelves, searching for anything that might mention King Rowan, his death, or the disappearance of Alistair. At first the records seem mundane: grain inventories, local disputes, land grants, tax receipts. But deeper in the archive, the texts change. They become darker, more secretive. Letters hidden within letters, notes written in hurried script with no signatures, coded messages referencing unnamed nobles and unspecified incidents. Then you find it. A folder marked Provitus, Regalis. Your pulse quickens as you unfold the parchment. The handwriting is heavily abbreviated, the ink fading, but the meaning is unmistakable. It describes a royal feast where King Rowan fell ill suddenly, witnesses reporting. He clutched his stomach, collapsed and died by dawn. But then the text shifts into something far more sinister. It mentions an unnamed monk summoned to the castle days earlier, trained in silent methods, whose departure hours before the king's collapse was never officially recorded. You continue reading. Another passage mentions a young prince escorted from the castle under the guise of protective custody, only for the escort to return alone. The scribe notes the escort showed signs of distress and confessed privately that he feared reprisal from higher authorities. Your fingers tremble. Someone inside the church knew exactly what happened. Someone wrote it down. And someone hid these letters where no ordinary eyes would ever find them. But there is one last document tucked beneath the rest, sealed with wax, unbroken. The seal shows the emblem of a bishop you do not recognize. You hesitate for only a moment before breaking it. Inside is a short, chilling note. The heir still lives. His survival threatens the balance we have built. Should he resurface, he must be silenced before the truth spreads. You stare at the words until they blur. You've just uncovered proof, not rumor, not speculation. Proof of a conspiracy involving church officials and political actors working together to erase a royal bloodline. And then, the candle flickers. Footsteps echo in the hallway outside. Slow, measured, getting closer. You blow out the candle instinctively, plunging the archive into darkness. The footsteps stop directly outside the door. A moment of breathless silence follows. Then the handle turns slowly. Someone is coming in. Not a novice, not a scribe. A man who walks like he knows exactly what is hidden inside this room. You back into the shadows, clutching the stolen documents as the door creaks open, spilling a sliver of torchlight across the floor. A dark-robed monk steps inside, not just any monk, a Dominican inquisitor, and he's holding a list with names written upon it. One of them is Alistair, another is yours. The inquisitor steps fully into the archive, closing the door behind him with the careful finality of someone who never leaves tasks half done. You press yourself deeper into the dark corner between two shelves, holding your breath as the faint torchlight stretches across the room like a hungry hand searching for you. His sandals whisper softly against the stone floor, the sound too controlled to belong to a novice or clumsy brother. This man was trained to hunt, to interrogate, to extract truth from unwilling mouths. You watch, motionless, as he walks to the central table, sets down the torch, and unrolls the parchment he carries. Your stomach twists when you see the list. Names written in sharp, angular handwriting. Some you recognize: nobles, minor officials, a few monks. Others belong to strangers. But two names strike you like a blow: Alistair of Rowan and yours. Inked clearly, as though foreseen. as though your involvement in this conspiracy was expected from the moment you stepped into these lands. The Inquisitor studies the list with a heavy, calculating seriousness, tapping one finger on the edge of the parchment. You do not dare move, blink, or breathe. His gaze sweeps the room slowly, assessing each shadow, each shelf, the faintest draft in the air. Then suddenly, he stiffens. He notices the folder you left slightly ajar, the one marked Privitus, Regalis. His jaw tightens. He crosses the room with long strides, reaches the folder, and lifts it, examining the broken seal on the secret letter you read. A low hum escapes his throat, not quite anger, not quite satisfaction, something colder, something like recognition. You know you only have seconds. You can't remain here, and you can't let him find you with evidence in hand. As his back turns slightly, you slip behind a tall shelf and search desperately for another exit. Your fingertips brush the wall, smooth stone interrupted by a narrow indentation. A seam, you push lightly, and the slab shifts just enough to reveal a small passageway beyond. You squeeze through the opening, just as the Inquisitor turns sharply, sensing movement. You freeze in the shadowed hallway, hidden by mere inches of stone, while he stares at the darkness you left behind. Then he speaks, quiet, chilling. Truth leaves footprints, and you have left plenty. His voice echoes faintly as he begins pacing the archive again, but he doesn't yet know which way you fled. You take your chance. You slip down the hidden corridor, muscles tight, clutching the stolen letters. The passage carries you deeper under the monastery, its air heavy with dust and old secrets. Eventually, a wooden hatch opens onto the back of the estate. You climb out into the cold night, pulling the hatch shut. Far on the other side of the walls, you hear bells begin to ring, soft, distant, and ominous. You don't know whether they're sounding for prayer or for alarm, but you do not wait to find out. You run. Fields race past you, then orchards, then a sloping road that leads toward a low valley dotted with lantern lights. After what feels like an eternity, the land broadens into a trade route, one that connects this countryside to the great cities of the Italian peninsula. Caravans pass here, laden with goods, messages, stories, and secrets. You slow your pace, blending with a small group of merchants heading south, their carts creaking softly under the weight of olive oil, wool, parchment, and spices. The further you walk, the more the landscape changes. The fields give way to rolling hills lined with vineyards, and the air shifts from earthy countryside to the faintest scent of sea breeze. When the sun finally rises, you see the towers of Venice ahead, thin, sharp silhouettes rising from the morning mist like the fingers of a sleeping giant. The water glitters silver, bustling markets echo with the calls of vendors, the clatter of barrels, and the creaking of gondolas. The city feels alive, watchful, and full of secrets. This is where the real networks operate. Venice in the medieval age was a hub of whispered messages, coded letters, and private deals that never saw daylight. The city governments maintained masked informants, merchants exchanged hidden ledgers, foreign ambassadors traded bribes, not gifts. And behind all of it was the infamous Bocca di Leone, the lion's mouth, slitted stone faces built into walls where citizens could drop anonymous accusations, many of which were read only by powerful councils. In a city like this, truth and lies had the same weight. You follow the crowds deeper into the city, listening to rumors swirling like tides around you. You hear mention of a noble family practicing unapproved maritime rituals. You hear of a Florentine banker whose ship carried incriminating documents and vanished without a trace. You hear that Genoa and Milan are locked in an invisible war of spies, each attempting to infiltrate the other's councils. It becomes clear that you're no longer dealing with village-level conspiracies. You've stepped into a battleground where entire states fight using shadows instead of swords. You slip into a busy cafe near the shipyard. The room is dim, filled with the smell of roasted coffee beans and damp wood. Sailors, merchants, and scholars all gather here, some laughing loudly, others hunched close over small pieces of parchment. You take a seat in a corner and open Alistair's parchment at last. Inside is a map, not of kingdoms or villages, but of people. A web of names, arrows, symbols, connections between church officials, nobles, abbots, and even members of merchant guilds. Some names are circled in red. Others are crossed out entirely. One phrase appears again and again in the margins. Custodiant veritatem submer, keep the truth beneath the sea. You recognize some of the names. Bishops, abbots, a Venetian noble, and then another name leaps out at you, underlined twice, Bishop Aurelio of Venice. It's the same bishop's seal that appeared on the secret letter in the archive, the one that ordered the prince to be silenced. Before you can process this, someone slides into the seat across from you. You jolt, but the man raises both hands in peace. He wears a plain brown cloak and a half smile that seems both friendly and dangerously insightful. You're holding something very valuable, he says calmly, and very deadly. You ask who he is. He answers by placing a small carved token on the table, a token marked with a winged lion, a Venetian state agent, one of the silent watchers. He leans forward. We've been tracking Bishop Aurelio for months, a man who deals in poison, secrets and quiet executions, a man who fears the truth you're holding, and a man who won't hesitate to kill anyone connected to that parchment. Your heart tightens. The agent notices and gives a slow, grim nod. You're in grave danger, but there's still one place left to uncover the full truth. He slides your map back toward you. The bishop keeps a private vault, beneath the waterline. You ask how to reach it. He stands slowly, pulling his hood up. Meet me tonight, he says, in the old northern quarter, by the abandoned bridge. Then he pauses, his expression darkening. But be careful. You're not the only one seeking the vault. Someone else is already in Venice. Someone who is not supposed to be alive. He leaves without another word. You stare after him, pulse pounding, realizing what he just implied and what it means for Alistair's survival. Night in Venice arrives in layers. First, the colors drain slowly from the sky, the last gold washing into grey. Then the sounds change. The sharp clatter of daytime trade softens into the gentler slap of water against stone, the low murmur of voices from tavern doorways, the creak of moored boats rocking slightly as the tide shifts. Lanterns flicker to life along the canals, smearing trembling paths of light across the black surface. You move through this new, quieter city like a shadow, following the directions the state agent gave you. The old northern quarter, the abandoned bridge, after dark. The northern quarter feels older than the rest of Venice, like a dream of the city half forgotten. The houses lean a little closer together here, the stones more worn, the wooden shutters more weathered. The abandoned bridge appears at last, a narrow arch stretching over a thin canal, its parapet cracked, one side blocked with a crooked wooden barrier that no one has bothered to repair. The water beneath it is darker than the rest, as if it leads somewhere deeper than it should. You wait, minutes pass. You listen to the distant splash of oars, the faint laughter from somewhere across the water, the distant toll of a bell marking another hour, slipping quietly away. Eventually soft footsteps approach. The agent from the cafe emerges from a side alley, cloak drawn up, face shadowed. He doesn't greet you aloud. He simply nods and gestures for you to follow him up onto the bridge. At the center he stops and kneels, running his fingers along the stone surface. The bishop's vault is beneath us, he murmurs. Old storage chambers, built before the city sealed most of its underways. He uses them now for things that cannot exist on paper. He finds a recessed iron ring between two stones, and pulls. A slab shifts, just enough to reveal a narrow stairway descending into the darkness below the canal line. Damp, cold air rises to meet you, smelling of stone, old tides, and secrets that haven't seen the sky in years. You descend carefully, one hand against the wall, the other still gripping the folded map and letters. The agent closes the hatch behind you, and for a moment the only light comes from the small lantern he carries. The stairs spiral downward, until they open into a low chamber whose walls sweat with condensation. At first you see nothing unusual, just crates, barrels, and a few rusted hooks. But against one wall stands a heavy chest bound with iron bands and secured by an elaborate lock. The agent steps toward it, like a man approaching both a treasure and a tomb. This is where he keeps what he can't trust anyone else to hold, the agent says softly. Blackmail, ledgers, agreements made in sin and sealed in gold. We've been trying to reach this vault for years. He produces a set of thin metal tools from his sleeve and kneels before the lock. The The quiet clicks seem too delicate for such a heavy object, yet within moments there is a final sharp turn, and the chest yields. Inside there are no glittering coins or jewels. Instead there are bundles of documents, neatly tied and labeled in a hard angular hand. You see names, cities, families, orders, Venice, Milan, Florence, abbeys and priories, Templar houses now dissolved, healers under observation, merchants suspected of routing information. Each packet is a story of power held over someone else. The agent selects one bundle marked with the bishop's seal and the word Regis of the king. He unties it carefully. Pages spill out, ink still dark despite the damp air. You scan the lines and feel your chest tighten. Here, in blunt, almost bored language, is the architecture of everything you've walked through, payments made to monastic specialists after noble deaths, letters confirming that certain forest rituals would be managed to strengthen the church's authority, detailed notations about which wells to close quietly to redirect trade or encourage migration away from troublesome villages. There are even reports about poisonings disguised as illness, the movement of information during the plague, and generous gifts sent to men who made problems disappear. Then you find a letter that stops you cold. It bears King Rowan's crest, but the handwriting is not his. It's the bishop's, imitating his tone, directing military support toward a stable succession and confirming that the sickly prince has passed peacefully. You know now that this was part of the cover, an official reassurance forged in the king's name to support the false story of Alistair's death. Beneath it lies another document, more recent. It describes persistent rumors of a surviving heir moving through the countryside, a man some believe to be Rowan's son. It notes that a Dominican inquisitor has been dispatched to intercept the threat and retrieve any letters or maps that might connect monastic officials to the assassination. On the margin, written in small precise letters, there is a short note: if captured, bring him to Venice. The sea keeps quiet what the land cannot. You're still staring at those words when you hear it. The faint scrape of something above. The agent's head snaps upward. He quickly lowers the lid of the chest, though he doesn't lock it. The lantern flame trembles as faint vibrations run down the stone steps you descended only minutes ago. Someone is opening the hatch. The agent moves toward the wall, motioning you into a narrow recess half concealed by a hanging piece of old canvas. You press yourself into the cold stone as footsteps descend, not hurried, not clumsy, but measured, confident. This is not someone who has stumbled on the vault by accident. This is someone who belongs here. A figure emerges into the lantern light, cloaked, hood lowered, but the way he moves is unmistakable. Bishop Aurelio himself. His face is sharper than you imagined, eyes dark and bright in the same breath. He carries no torch. He trusts the one already there. His gaze sweeps the chamber and falls on the open chest. For a heartbeat, the world feels suspended. Then his expression tightens, not in panic but in cold fury. So he murmurs, "The state finally found its way into my cellars." He doesn't reach for a weapon. Instead he reaches into his cloak and pulls out a folded parchment. "It seems we are all playing the same game," he says aloud, as if knowing someone is listening even without seeing you. "You chase me, I chase ghosts, and the ghosts chase crowns." He opens the parchment, reveals a sketch, rough but clear. A man's face, older, tired-eyed, bearing the hint of a royal jawline. Alistair. Reported alive, the bishop remarks, sighted near the border road, and then, he smiles slightly without warmth. A monk reports he vanished into the woods, pursued by an unknown hunter. Perhaps he lives, perhaps he doesn't, perhaps he is already drowned in a canal like so many others who know too much. The outcome is almost irrelevant. The rumor of him is enough to trouble kings. The agent beside you tenses, hands curling into fists. You can feel his anger, his desperate desire to act, but he doesn't move, not yet. The bishop closes the parchment and returns it to his cloak. "The medieval world loves its conspiracies," he says softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "They sleep better believing that someone somewhere is in control, even if that someone is a villain." He glances at the chest. "The truth is messier. None of us control as much as they think. We simply write faster than the others." He turns toward the stairs, climbing them with the same unhurried grace. A moment later, You hear the hatch close overhead. The agent exhales shakily. He knows, he whispers. He knows someone's been in his vault. We won't get another chance like this. He looks at you, eyes reflecting both urgency and resignation. We can expose some of this, enough to shake a few pillars, but not all of it. The web is too wide, too old, too protected. You look down at the letters still clutched in your hands, the quiet, inked proof of poisonings, plots and decisions made in candlelit rooms to steer the lives and deaths of thousands. You think of the royal kitchens and their tasters, the forest clearings and hidden rituals, the monks who watched more than they prayed, the Templars and their secret ledgers, the healers accused of witchcraft, the wells feared at midnight, the impostors and heirs walking roads alone. You realize something very simple, and very unsettling. Medieval conspiracy theories weren't wild, baseless fantasies, they were reflections of a world where so much truly did happen in the dark. You and the agent leave the vault the way you came, climbing back toward the muffled sounds of the city. When you emerge onto the bridge again, night has deepened. Venice glows softly under the moon, its canals black and smooth as glass. Boats drift by, their lanterns small, moving stars. People laugh in distant alleys, unaware of the papers you carry, or the quiet wars fought in basements and archives beneath their feet. You walk along the canal until the sounds soften, the streets narrow, and the city feels less like a web and more like a quiet dream again. Somewhere maybe, Alistair is still alive. Somewhere, a healer mixes medicine and hopes no one asks too many questions. Somewhere, a monk finishes writing a line in a ledger that will never be read by those it condemns. And you? You find a small, sheltered spot by the water, where the reflection of a single lantern ripples gently. You sit, letting the tension of the journey bleed away into the lapping of the canal. The conspiracies you've walked through tonight begin to feel distant, like echoes from another lifetime. The world narrows to the sound of water, the soft breath of night air, the faint creak of wood as a boat shifts in its mooring. If your eyes are growing heavy now, that's all right, let them. You've traveled through kitchens and forests, monasteries and marketplaces, plague towns and pleasure cities, wells and vaults and hidden archives. You've seen how much of medieval life unfolded in shadows, and how much of what people feared wasn't madness at all, but instinct. So, if you're still awake enough to hear this, thank you for wandering through the dark with me tonight. If these slow candlelit journeys help you rest, you're always welcome to come back. You can gently like the video, if you'd like, subscribe to Candlelit History if you want more nights like this, and maybe leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, and whether you made it to the end awake or drifted off somewhere back in the forest. For now though, you don't need to chase any more secrets. Let the papers lie, let the city dim, let the water keep its quiet stories. The screen will fade to black, the sounds will soften, and you can just float for a while in the dark, like a small boat on a still canal, rocked to sleep by a world of conspiracies that for tonight at least can wait until morning.